Hello friends and fashion lovers, you're welcome back. Thank you for clicking on this video and thank you for all your love and support. In today's tutorial, I will be showing you how I made this lovely keyhole trendy kaftan. For this tutorial, I use a yellow fabric, 3.5 yards, and also a black lace trimming. And I won't be chalking directly on my fabric because I don't want it to make a big mess. So I'll be using a pattern paper to show you how you can do the drafting on your fabric. For the amount of fabric you need, double your length measurements and hemming allowance, and you also need double your sleeve length because you will be folding it lengthwise and also widthwise, like so. And I've already placed my fabric on hold, and this will be for the sleeve side. So on my pattern paper, I've already drawn my guideline. That's my center line and my shoulder line. So I'm going to put in my chest measurement. That's from shoulder to chest line. Then from shoulder to waist line. Then you can put your under bust line, but this is optional. I will talk about this why you might need this under bust line. Then you also need your hip line. Then of course the full length of where you want your dress to stop. So I'm just going to extend this line out. That's what I did here. So next is to label this line to avoid confusion. So next is to put your desired neck width. I used 3.5 inches. Then of course have your shoulder width measurement. Then from that, have your shoulder width measurement, put in your sleeve length. Next is the neck depth for the front. I use 5 inches for the front and 1.5 for the back. If you are using this neck dip that I'm using, that's 1.5 for the back and 5 inches for the front, you might need a slit at the back, but I really didn't need, so use your desired neck depth and width. So next thing to do on your chest line, that's the chest line is where you would have your armhole. Put quarter of your chest measurement there and add ease. I used 1 inch of ease, but initially I thought I was going to use ½ inch of ease. Then on the waistline, you will put quarter of your waist measurement. Yes, quarter of your waist measurement. And you have to be absolutely sure about this waistline. ½ inch of ease is alright if you're going to be having a zipper at the back of your dress. But if you're not going to be having a zipper at the back of your dress, I would advise you use 1 inch of ease. So this is my 1 inch of ease. But if you're using ½ inch of ease, it's going to be in the middle of, it's going to be a lot smaller. And you might have some difficulty putting it on. So I'm just noting the ½ inch, but you just have to be absolutely sure of this waistline because you don't want your garments looking funny. So I used 1 inch of ease. So on the hip line, you put quarter of the hip measurement and also add your ease. So you could add ½ inch of ease or 1 inch of ease. But honestly, when it comes to the hip line, you can adjust the ease later. So what is important is this waistline. You can even ignore the bust or the chest line, but the waistline is really important when it comes to adding of ease. So right now, I am going to take the measurements I have on my hip and I'm going to be transferring it to my hem line. So from there you want to put it on your hem line. So you can decide to have a flare dress at this point. That's by adding like 5 inches to your quarter of your hip measurement at the down part. You can decide to do whatever you like at this point. But if you're going to make it like mine, you're going to come to the hem of your dress. So from the hem of your dress, you are going to measure upward. That's from the hem. I'm not talking about the hemming allowance. That's the full length. Aside your hemming allowance, you are going to measure upward 10 to 15 inches depending on your height. So you're going to measure 10 to 15 inches. So for me, I used 12 inches. You're going to measure upward. That's if you're using the same hip width measurement at the hem. So I'm just marking that point. So now that I've marked this point, the next thing to do is to come back to the waistline and work on the waistline. So now back to where you marked your waist curve. Sorry, I didn't know it wasn't visible. Measure 2 inches away from where your waist measurement ended. And also on that waistline, measure 2 inches upward. And also measure 1 inch downward. You are going to connect this, but you can divide this into two, 1.5 inch down, 1.5 inch up. But I find out that it's very flattering when you do 2 inch up and 1 inch down. So now it's time to connect this hole. That's the keyhole right there. So this is the connection right there. And you want to measure half inch. You want to measure half inch away from where the waist measurement stops. So just give a seaming allowance away from where the waist measurement stops. You don't want to do exactly where the waist measurement is. You just want to give seaming allowance so that you don't encroach into your ease allowance. So here I have about half an inch. You want to have at least quarter of an inch because you will be sewing that part. So now that you are done with the waist measurement, if you are leaving the upper part folded and you are not going to divide it, you are going to sew it a bit upward towards your chest line. That's when it's time to stitch. You are going to stitch it a bit upward towards your chest line. So just find the middle of that point, what is left, and you likely stitch this. That's if you're not working on your shoulder. So next is to cut. So I'm just going to cut this keyhole right here. Measure 2.5 inches and slant your shoulder at that point. So if you've slant your shoulder, you are pretty much done at this point. So with the shoulder slant, I am ready to cut out my pattern and place it on my fabric to cut out my fabric. And at the hemline, I am just giving it a slight curve, so there's nothing fancy about the hemline. Then of course shift out and adjust my front neckline. So now it's time to stitch. On the front, you are going to centralize your lace trimming and stitch that at the center of your front. After that, you placed your back piece on the front right side facing and stitch it down. So after stitching, the next thing to work on is your keyhole. So you want to notch it like so. By the time you notch, make sure you don't exceed your seaming allowance, just a little notch. You want to tuck those in and hold on to it. Open to the wrong side, you're going to be able to grab it. Obviously, the notch part would have shown you how it's supposed to fit. You can go ahead and pin, but honestly, you don't need to pin. You can actually sew this part without pinning it down. So you're going to pin it in place and stitch that, and you are going to be repeating the same process for the second side. What process do I mean? You start by notching it. So make sure that you arrange and everything matches, and you notch just a little bit, enough to show that demarcation. Then open it, place right side facing, and you're going to take your sewing machine and stitch it down. After stitching it down, you want to go ahead and notch it all around. Yes, you want to make sure that you notch this opening around, and when you're done notching, just give it a nice press so that everything lies flat and nice. To our pattern now, we are referring to our pattern. So this is the keyhole that we marked out, and you're going to stitch down your dress. So remember that we matched the keyhole. You're not going to bother yourself about the upper parts, because the upper part would have taken care of itself. The reason that we had the under bust measurement was so that you don't exceed, no matter how much keyhole you want to make, don't exceed your under bust measurement. So now you're going to stitch from that waistline to the hemline. And don't forget to stop at where you had marked. So now from the waistline to your marked hemline. So I just use a yellow chalk to chalk that down. So you're going to go ahead and stitch that. After that, you hem the neckline with a bias tape. If you haven't subscribed, please click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the future uploads. So, and there you have it. In those simple steps, your dress should be ready. Yes, the upper part of this dress is not stitched. Other than the keyhole part and the side, the bust part is not stitched, and you can see that it's well covered. It is quite comfortable. If you have gotten to this point, I want to say a very big thank you for watching, and see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.